different levels of headship. So we've purposely curated it so that you can ask those questions and be really honest and really open about what you want to find. So what I'm going to do is bring on our first 4 panelists. So we've got Krissi, Mumin, Kate and Shahista. And so we'll bring them on and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So I'm just going to bring them all in. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here as part of this panel.
Pleasure to be here.
So what I'm going to do first is go around. I'll go around in the order on the screen. If we can then introduce yourself, give you a brief intro as to who you are and what you do, and then we'll get into the Q&A. So I'm going to start as first on my screen with Krissi, please.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon and good evening everybody. I'm Krissi Carter. At the moment I'm head teacher of Walsall Studio School. Studio Schools is a very unique type of school. There's only about 20 left in the whole of the country, and it is a secondary school for students aged 14 to 19 with specialisms in media, performing arts and music. We do have year 10 students and year 11 students. Those students study English, maths and science, but the rest of their timetable are those creative subjects. So it's very difficult to your typical mainstream secondary school. I have, however, also been a head teacher of a secondary mainstream school for 7.5 years as well. So I've got experience in that too. Most of my teaching career has been down in South London, but I've also taught in Brighton, and then I moved to Shropshire, and now here I am in Walsall. So a very diverse range of schools that I've worked in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Krissi. And Krissi also spoke at one of our very first Step Up events in Manchester. And we've got another event coming up in Manchester, which I'll tell you about at the end. So definitely keep your eye out for that. Thank you, Krissi. Mumin, if I could come to you next, please.
Hi, afternoon, Ben. Afternoon, all. Yeah, I'm Mumin Humayun, principal of the Stockwood Park Academy, which is part of Advantage Schools. It's a large secondary school in Luton. 11 to 18, there's about 1,500 students, 160 staff, about 96 teachers. I took up the post in January 2020. That year was a little hazy, I think, for all of us, and I'm not just talking about lockdown. I did Google. I think I'm not Google. I looked at the DFE site. I think I'm one of about 40 head teachers from my background, so British, Bangladeshi background. Yeah, and what I would say, headship wasn't really my goal in life, but gosh, it's addictive.
Thanks, Mumin. Thank you very much. Shahista, if we can go to you next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shahista. I'm a newly appointed primary head teacher. I work at Regent's Park Community Primary School in Birmingham, which is a 2-form entry. So we have about 400 pupils from nursery all the way to year 6. Before stepping into this role, I was a senior leader for quite a while, mainly working around safeguarding, inclusion, attendance, and behaviour. And I'd say I'm very much in that early phase of headship. So what I'll share today is very much real time, what the job actually feels like on a day-to-day basis, what surprises me, and what I'm learning as I go. Thank you.
Thank you, Shahista. And last but by no means least, Kate.
Hello, everybody. My name's Kate Owbridge, and I retired from 21 years of primary headship in last July. That was across a number of schools, inner London, outer London, suburbs, and then we moved out to rural Kent. So I worked in headship in the market town, and also then became executive head, so had a couple of rural village schools. So a really vast experience. Exactly what Mumin said. I didn't set out to be a head. I set out to be a good primary school teacher. And once you start, you can't. It's like Pringles. Once you start, you can't stop. But I've enjoyed every single minute, and I still do school support mainly with schools that I know. I'm a school governor locally, and I do also work with Ofsted because schools are schools, and I don't think I can ever really retire from it altogether.
Thanks, Kate. And Kate also was one of our Step Up Face-to-Face event speakers in our first event in London. So it's great to have people here for the first time, but also people who know us, and we know that's the same with the audience. So thank you for your introductions and sort of giving us an overview of your careers today. and it's lovely to see that range. So my first question I'm going to put to you is, we know that if I asked you the question, what's the day in the life of a head teacher like? Your first answer would probably say that every day is different and every day is varied. So my first question is linked to that, but more so because I think from what I know about people who've signed up for this event, a lot of people are deputy heads or assistant heads or other senior leadership roles, and are thinking about taking that step, or is that step the right step for them in the future? So my first question to all of you, and because you'll all have different perspective of this, is how does the role of your equivalent, like head of school, principal, how does that differ to other SLT roles like being deputy head or an assistant head? I'll come to Shahista first, because you're the person who's probably made the most recent transition from senior leader to head teacher. So what would you say, Shahista?
I think I think you touched upon this really well. It's how unpredictable the day is. That was probably the biggest thing for me. As a head teacher, I start off the morning with a clear plan, and within 10 minutes, I'm dealing with something completely different, and usually 10 things might come my way. Could have a subject access request. There's a concern about a parent, got an upset colleague in school, someone's not feeling well, a child might not be feeling well. So I'm constantly switching gears. Compared to my deputy headship role, I've got to say it's really demanding.
Illustrating the point.
It's like day in the life.
Sorry, I've just got someone trying to burst into the office. Bless them for the right reasons. So that's just an example. That was not staged. So for me, when I was a deputy head teacher, there was a lot of protection. I didn't realize how much my head teacher and the leaders before me would really protect my time as a DSL. And I was able to do all those things. But now, as a head teacher, I have to protect my leaders' time and energies and make sure that everyone is calibrated. So as we say, get your ducks in a row. So it's actually, having that extra layer of responsibility. And it doesn't really ever switch off, unless you switch off your phone at night and don't look at your emails.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, like you said, prime example there where everyone wants a bit of you. Obviously, you're talking from a primary perspective, so even though obviously schools are schools, as Kate said, but Mumin, how would that translate to a secondary context? Would you would agree, or does it differ slightly?
Sorry, in terms of.
Sorry, I'm just handing over to Mumin now, based on what you said, Shahista, as in. That I totally agree with everything you said there. So that looking at that in a secondary context, is that the same, or how does it slightly differ?
Yeah, I think the move from senior leadership, being an assistant head or a deputy head, often, even when I talk to new colleagues, everyone wants to talk about strategy. Like, I think you imagine being around the table and kind of discussing these grand plans about shaping and moving things forward. And I kind of say to the team, 90% of our job is operational, and the operation is the strategy. Like, if you get those kind of the day-to-day things right, and I'm talking about greeting children at the gate, talking about how you interact with parents, get those kind of things. So sometimes maybe the image that I had before as a senior leader was like, it must be like, and I don't want to play down the joy of the job, but there's a level of it being mundane. Like, it is chaotic, but it's every day it is chaotic, so that becomes the norm, and it's managing that on a day-to-day basis and just making sure that an organization as a whole is organized. And it is wildly exciting, but a lot of it is making sure some basic things are done really well. So there's a few simple ingredients that you need to make sure you're doing really well. Whereas as an assistant head, sometimes you might be in charge of a project, but that project is an aspect of a school. Whereas the burden, the privilege of headship is kind of everything. And you kind of see everything from above, and you see how all the parts of this jigsaw interact. And you're the person who's having to kind of make sure like things are just flowing in the right direction. The analogy I draw is the temperature in a room. So, you know, when it's too hot, you turn it down. When it's too cold, you turn it up. And as the principal, I think we have this luxury role of just knowing when to, because we have that the power or the role to just turn things up or dial things down, and knowing when to do it. And that takes a while to learn, because once you're in an organization, it takes a while to adjust to like the culture, and then you're kind of reshaping that culture. And it's about dialing things up and down to get the perfect spot, because we know like things flourish at the perfect temperature.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Mumin. And I suppose, like you said, that big difference between being a senior leader versus the head teacher is that those multiple projects and multiple areas and aspects going on at the same time. And I suppose, Krissi, I'm going to come to you next, because like you said in your intro, you've applied that sort of to very different school concepts. Being a Midlands myself, Shropshire and Walsall are two very different places in a way, and compared to South London. So how have you found that sort of through doing your various leadership roles and serving those different communities? What would you say in terms of is the main thing for people to consider when looking at headship?
I think, first of all, you need to be absolutely sure that you want to be a head teacher and realise that the responsibility lies with you. The buck stops with you. And that is a huge pressure for a person. And I don't think you quite get it until you actually sit in that head teacher's chair. And all of a sudden you're like, wow, okay, every decision that is made in this school, the buck stops with me. It's my responsibility. If anything goes wrong, that's on me. So I need to make sure that every procedure, every policy, everything is absolutely right. And the thing is, how you are and how you present yourself in school will determine how the staff are. It will determine how the students are. So if you're in a bad mood and the staff know about it, you will have a bad day on that day. It's like they can sense it even through the walls. And I think that is probably one of the most challenging things. Even if you are dying inside, yeah, and you are feeling the pressure, the second you walk out through that door, it is right, okay, come on guys, we can do this. And you have to be positive, and you have to encourage your senior leaders to also have that positive can-do attitude, because it just takes one or two people to not have that, or they start getting involved with any gossip or drama within the staff team, and that can really derail the school. So you need to be able to understand that how you present and what your mood is going to be like will literally affect the whole school. So if that's being a head teacher in a school, you know, my first school had 1,300 students, it will affect the staff and the students of that big school. At the moment, I teach in a studio school. There's far fewer students. Maximum, we will only ever have 350. So, of course, it's a smaller staff group. And when it's a smaller school, everybody feels everything even more. So I can only assume that it's similar to a primary school, for example. Like any little decision that you make will be amplified even more. And then touching upon the point that Mumin said before, when you are ahead of a larger secondary school, you've got different members of the SLT team, you've got lots of middle leaders who you can delegate responsibilities to, or there'll be one member of staff who's in charge of pastoral, and then you've got somebody else in charge of academic, and you've got somebody else in charge of curriculum. Whereas in a smaller school, you don't have that luxury. So now, as head teacher, there's lots of things that I'm involved with that I wouldn't have been involved with in a larger school. So from next week, I'm going to be in charge of safeguarding, attendance, the parts of the curriculum, on top of all of the head teacher things that you need to carry on doing. So it's very important, I think, for somebody who's looking to step into headship to decide exactly what type of school is it that you want to go into, because you may be from mainstream primary or secondary school, but have you thought of alternative provisions? Have you thought of a studio school? Have you thought of a SEND school, for example? And really go and visit that school, get a feel for that school, because I think you know the second that you walk through that door whether that's the right school for you. Meet the leadership team, see if you can work with these people, because the second you're the head teacher, if you're appointed, that's who you're going to have to work with. And if they're not the right people, you're going to have some really difficult conversations.
That's great. Thank you, Krissi. So many brilliant points there. And Kate, then coming to you finally, because obviously I know you said you've served many communities, but also not just an executive head teacher. And obviously that role can look slightly different school to school. So sort of your experiences, how do those roles differ, and what should people be sort of aware of?
So I think the first thing that I want to do is just pick up on what Krissi was saying about the different sizes of school and the different types of school, because my advice, and nobody has to take it, my advice would be, if you're looking for your first headship, go with the school you know. If you're an assistant head deputy head of a 2-form entry primary, look for another 2-form entry primary, because you know how that works and you know how those systems will work, because they are different in 1-form entry and they're really different in village schools. And I did work with a person once said, when I be a head, I really want to be head of a village school. They've never worked in a village school before. And although you might think, there's only a few teachers, only a few children. Oh my goodness, it's so difficult. Every headship is difficult, which is why I would suggest go with what you know to start with, so that you're already familiar with something. The other thing that I think is interesting, and I've reflected on this quite a lot, having done the job for such a long time, I can recognise how fish I was when I started, and how you grow into it, just like you do when you're a teacher. You know, when you start, you're full of all this great stuff and all the rest of it. You might be great, but actually, after a few years, you start honing your craft and you get better at what you do. And if you move schools and adjust to those other schools, that brings another new skill set. And I think one of the things that I learned, two things I learned, which don't often come out, so people say, headship's really lonely. Headship's really lonely. And it can be. It can be, because nobody's wearing your shoes, nobody's sitting in your seat. You're the only person on that payroll with the role of head teacher. But it doesn't have to be, because there'll be a head teacher down the road doing the same thing in the same community. There'll be people in your little cluster group. There'll be people in your MAT or your local authority that you can connect with. There'll be people you did your MPQ with, and all those sort of people who you can ring up and go, oh my God, this awful thing's just happened. I've made a right mess here. What am I going to do? And they go, don't worry, I did that before. It's fine. And that's how you kind of realise it is lonely, but it doesn't have to be. You can make it not lonely. And I think the other thing comes back to what Shahista says. I think it took me a long, long time to realise that actually the buck only stops with you for certain things. There's always somebody above you, always. MAT or local authority, there's always somebody, and most of the time that's a great thing, because you can go, this thing, or they're coming down to pat you on the back and say, well done, that was really great. And even in, let's take the worst case example possible, even in an Ofsted, the reason an Ofsted might go wrong, and you might panic about that, and it all goes wrong and all the rest of the thing, oh no, what's going to me, they're going to throw me out. It won't be your single fault or your single responsibility why that went wrong. So whoever's coming in to support and help will be looking at all those different things that happened, and it will be a collective thing. And the flip side of that is, when everything's going really well, it's that collective responsibility. And certainly, I can't speak for secondary because I don't know what it's like to be a secondary teacher, but for a primary head, you look at your kids and your staff, and it's like just having one big class, and that's what I loved as a primary teacher. So I think there are lots, as people have said, there are lots and lots of things that are different, but I don't think that some of the things that are scary different need to be as scary as they're sometimes made out to be.
Thanks, Kate. That's brilliant. And thank you, everyone, for your answers for that first question, because there's so many different points that I want to pull apart there and go on to the next and go on to future. So there's two key points I'm going to pick up. I'm going to pick on the first one now. We sort of alluded to there sort of that preparation for becoming a head, and obviously that preparation could come in different forms. Ultimately, I think everyone forgets that you're not taught everything on the MPQH. Like, you're not taught, for example, last week on Thursday when my school had a massive power cut intermittently, that doesn't come up on the MPQH. So what sort of things could you suggest? Because we all know that often if you look at the MPQH framework, a lot of people applying for headship roles will know most of that, whether they've done the MPQH or not. But that sort of operational leadership you really get experience of. And as Mumin said, 90% of our role isn't operational, but you obviously get that as on the ground development. So if you're someone who is an aspiring head teacher, what sort of development, and that could be formal or informal development, would you suggest people looking at? Mumin, I'm going to come to you first, if I may.
Yeah, so I think when I was appointed, I'd had experience of lots of the areas. So whether it's pastoral, curriculum, safeguarding, I'd done a lot of those roles. But actually, the biggest difference is kind of the emotional aspect of dealing with in the role. So actually, like I can read a book and learn how to do processes, but actually the challenge of having multiple things being thrown at you at the same time, and how do you emotionally regulate and manage that? And I think what Kate said is so right. It can be lonely, but you need to reach out. So I'd say one of the key things is looking at a coach or a mentor. And I'm really grateful for my previous kind of line, my boss, mentor, who I still kind of lean in on. And whenever I say, look, this is something that's happening and I'm not sure, I need someone to sound things off, and just to guide someone who's been there, done that, and to let you know it's okay. I'd also say, like, using opportunities also to visit other schools and other, to outside your own bubble, because I think it can be an echo chamber where even if, I'm a large school, but actually I use every opportunity to visit primary schools, meet with primary colleagues, secondary colleagues and other schools and other settings. Just otherwise you become kind of institutionalized and you end up thinking in a very, insular way. And I'd also say just be patient. I think sometimes there's a hunger to kind of climb. And I often speak to colleagues who are like, oh, I'm looking to apply to be a head teacher. And I was like, yeah, but you're still an ECT, so you've got some time to go. And it's just saying, look, there's no rush. And I think you become, and my own view is that you are a much more effective leader when you've got the experience of working with lots of people in different contexts that have put you in difficult positions, and you've got that. Whereas if you've not had that experience, you don't have anything to fall back on. Like, so many of the challenges that I have, I was like, okay, I've been in similar positions many times, so I can lean back on that that memory or that experience, or I can lean in on colleagues. So I would say to hone your craft. So coach, mentor, visiting other schools where you can, and then just learning to hone your craft. And I still teach, so, and I'm still developing everything I do. So we're never at a stage that we're done learning.
That's great. Thanks, Mumin. Fantastic. Kate, if I can come to you next, because I know now, particularly post-retire, as you now are in retirement phase, you're supporting a lot of head teachers or other school leaders yourself. So what sort of things would you suggest in terms of that sort of?
Well, you can tell I'm retired because I'm not sitting in an office like the other poor three people. I'm in my lovely garden room. So the things that I have dragged every single one of my deputy heads and heads of school through kicking and screaming, whether they've liked it or not, is everything to do with finance and everything to do with HR. So because in my first headship was 3 years, and in that time I think I did every single possible HR procedure that we had to do: redundancies, restructuring, disciplinaries, capabilities, sudden death of a member of staff, all those kind of things. And as Mumin said, you can read a book and learn them, but actually when you realise that the person on the phone to you the most of the time in your week is your HR person, then actually, that's a big thing to have to manage. And again, as Mumin said, it's the emotional side of it, because nobody goes into headship wanting to get rid of people or wanting to do horrible procedures to people. What you're looking for is to have the best education for your children you possibly can, and the best people delivering that. And so it does bring all that emotion with it, and that's really, really hard. The finance side, because nobody ever teaches you finance, and it's different in every school, every local authority is different. And the same with maths as well. So every budget setting, every budget monitoring, I've had them in there doing it with me and the business manager, so that they know how it works. And so a couple of years ago, I had to take a few weeks out sick. I had a lot going on in my personal life, and I just couldn't manage everything at once. Took a bit of time out, and it was budget setting time when they just did it without me, because they'd been doing it for the last few years with me. So if you can get in on that, ask to be in on it. No, nobody should be saying, oh no, I'm not letting you see the budget, that's all mine. And I think the last thing I would say is know your school business manager's role, because I was in my 4th headship before I got a business manager. So before that, if there was building work happening in the holidays, I had to meet the project manager in my non-contracted hours. if there was a flood, I had to work out what was going to happen. I had to make, we have finance people doing the nitty gritty invoicing and what have you, but all those big things had to be done by me. And that was really, really hard. However, having done that, I know now what a good school business manager does. And I've always compared it to being like, your year 6 teachers, they teach those year 6 kids and they get them through the SATs, and then whatever comes back, you're either like, that was great, or not, so, or whatever happens. You're not sitting on their shoulder all year watching what they're doing. You trust them to do it, but you know what they're supposed to be doing. So if they need support or help, or they need the praise for doing well, you know that that's what you're giving. And if you don't know what your school business manager's job is, then you can't do that for them. So one of my heads of school went and shadowed our business manager for a couple of days, because they're the ones also have all the contacts for things like when it snows, who have I got to tell? When it floods, our village floods all the blooming time and the village school's forever closing. All those little things, when there's a power cut, when something happens that you're just not expecting, a fox runs into the hall or a rat runs down the corridor. We had that once. That's what those people know. And again, village school heads unlikely to have one, so you need to know where you go for that support.
Brilliant, thanks, Kate. So important. So Shahista, I'm going to come to you next as a newer head teacher. What sort of development did you have, and what sort of things do you wish you had to prepare you for the role that you could share with others?
Well, that's a really hard question about in hindsight. I think the first part is easier to answer. In terms of the development that I had, I was always proactive, because I always wanted to do better and serve the community better. And the only way I could do that is from a system leadership perspective. And so at every point throughout my career, I was thinking about what stage of leadership or what role did I hold, and what corresponding CPD would help me in do my role better. And so I'd always, I looked out for MPQs, the relevant ones at each point in my career. And every couple of years, I would think about doing another one so that I could challenge myself at every point. And I would use the feedback given by line managers and people around me. So as part of 360 feedback, I would use that to challenge myself, sign up for the next course, and implement my learning, make mistakes, seek feedback, and start that process again. That really helped me develop as an individual, as a professional, and help others around me as well as I moved up the stages in my career. And I think it's really about thinking also about the support structures that we have around you as well. It's about kind of getting out of your comfort zone, and really, I hate speaking in public, believe it or not, but at every point I will seize the opportunity where I can push myself, challenge myself so that I can grow. And we don't need to, sign up for that kind of negative rhetoric. We can actually be the positive forces and drive positive change by being a good role model, hopefully, for others. So whilst there are challenges, it's really important, like Mumin said, to lean on the networks around you, to think about those formal learning routes like the MPQs, like I mentioned, because it gives you that space, and I know colleagues have mentioned, it gives you that space with other leaders who are grappling with similar questions. So it's being part of that professional community. And I think Step Up is a fantastic one. And just going to networking events, whether it's a BayMed, Research Ed, just go out there, have conversations with individuals. And I think having also the humility to say, I just don't know, can someone help me with this? I think that would help. And in retrospect, I would say that just sometimes picking up the phone and asking that question. So thank you.
That's great, Shahista. Thank you so much. And thank you, as you said, for being that role model, and the public speaking tonight. It's great to have you here. So thank you for role modeling that to others as well. And last but by no means least, Krissi, what sort of development would you suggest aspiring head teachers to look at?
I'm going to say look into supervision. I'm really passionate about mental health and well-being, and I wish it was something that I knew more about right at the beginning of my first headship. For those who might not know what supervision is a formal confidential space that you speak with somebody who's trained to be a supervisor to talk through the emotional impact of your work. Because when you're a head, you're not going to be just hearing the safeguarding stories of the students, you're going to be hearing it from all of the staff as well. And some staff that I've worked with, you would never, ever realise on the surface that they were going through some of the most horrific things at home, whether that be domestic violence, whether that be cancer treatments, whether their child has been self-harming. Like literally, I have heard so many different stories. And over time, that can have a real impact on you because you're dealing with everything to do with the students. And in a large secondary school in particular, you could be dealing with 30, 40 different safeguarding cases every single day, or knowing about it every single day. And then on top of that, you've got goodness knows how many staff who are coming to you with problems. And you have to make some really, really tough decisions sometimes as to whether you're going to grant a leave of absence, whether you're not going to be able to do it. And then you have to deliver that message to the member of staff if it's not what they want. And that can take its toll on you. So for me, make sure that if it's not coaching that you've got, that you get some supervision and education support, do some great supervision work there. We use them as a school at the moment, and it's something that I would recommend for all safeguarding teams in schools as well. So I think for me, that would be the biggest development point.
Thanks, Krissi. And I suppose it's that linking on what everyone said there, the different types of development. Actually, a supervisor is great. Sometimes you need a coach, sometimes you might need a mentor, sometimes you guide, to actually being really attuned to what development you need. So thank you for that. I can't believe we've been talking for so long, and it's coming up to the final question time soon. One of the things I wanted to pick out, the other key theme I picked out from our initial sort of question was that one of those main differences between moving from a senior leadership role and being a senior leader where you often look after an area or a group of areas of the school versus looking after a whole school is that management of people is very different. As an assistant head or a deputy head, you might line manage a few, like a group of people, but a little bit of a wider group. Whereas head teacher, I often see in my own school, my classroom is right by the head teacher's office. The amount of people in and out, want a piece of the head teacher. It's obviously and it'd be different from school to school. Like Kate said, if you're a village head where you might only have 4 teachers versus say a secondary head where you've got 1,300 students, actually the number of staff you manage is different. And I suppose one of the key things is you go from the person often leading on those projects to leading the people that lead those areas. So one tip for empowering leaders to lead, so sort of getting that sense of trust so that you don't have someone knocking on your door every 5 minutes. You don't feel like you have to micromanage people, but you still need your finger in the pie, but not fully in the pie, if you like. What would be sort of one tip you would share with other people becoming head teachers to manage that? Because ultimately we know if you're trying to do everything, that'll just lead to burnout and things like that, but you still need to know a certain amount. So please, what would you say is your biggest tip in terms of empowering the people you lead?
Did you refer to me then, because it cut out?
Oh yeah, sorry, Krissi, yeah, you first. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's great. I would say you need to be comfortable not knowing absolutely everything. And what you want to do, especially in the recruitment process, is recruit people who are either very skilled at that area that you need them to be, and you learn from them, or they have that willingness to go and research and find out everything about whatever area it is that they're going to be leading on. And then you can learn alongside them as well. So for me, get comfortable not knowing absolutely everything. And the analogy I would use is I'm the conductor of an orchestra. I don't need to learn how to play a violin or know how to play a violin, but I know enough to be able to say, right, okay, louder here, softer here, staccato here, pizzicato, whatever it may be. So be comfortable that you aren't going to know every single technical term, for example, when it comes to finance or HR. But the thing is, you know enough about it to be able to move the school forward and be able to identify which people have the knowledge to be able to help you achieve whatever goal it is. And going back to what Kate was saying before, for me, the same thing, HR and finance, you know, when we went into teacher training, you don't really get to learn about those areas. I was very, very lucky for one of my deputy headships in particular, where my head teacher would put me in situations that I wasn't comfortable with, particularly with HR, and I learnt on the job, and I always knew that he was there to support me. Now, he didn't hold my hand throughout the whole entire process. He would let me make mistakes within reason, and that is just how I learnt. So I think an important thing being head is be comfortable with not knowing absolutely everything, but know enough so that you can drive the school forward.
That's great, Krissi. Thank you. And I loved your musical teacher analogy background there of the orchestra. I think it's a really great analogy there. Thanks, Krissi. Mumin, if I come to you next, what would be your key tip to empowering others to lead? Oh, sorry, I think you're muted.
I often say to my team, behind every kind of bang average head teacher, you've got an amazing PA, business manager, and VPs, and everyone else. So really making sure you are surrounded with people that are knowledgeable. And if they're not, making sure you're directing them to the support. So you've got that, because you can't hold all the information. The other kind of key reflection for me, and this is a chair of governors in my previous role spoke to me, you are interrupted a lot, students and staff all the time. And it's really frustrating. And this chair of governors said to me, Mumin, these staff and these students, they're not interruptions of your work, they're the purpose of it. And when you reframe that and think, do you know what? Yeah, that's the gig. Like, they're not interruptions, because the ability to keep the organization functioning is to make sure everything is moving along. And actually, if there are concerns and worries, I might not be the person that ultimately fixes things, but the ability to listen and to provide support and guidance allows that person to get on with the key job, which is making sure we're getting the best outcomes for our young people. So yeah, not viewing the interruptions as interruptions, but that's the gig.
Thanks, Mumin. A really good, useful tip. Shahista?
I think there's one thing that I'd say to anyone stepping into headship, it is, don't try to manage the role on your own. It's, and as I referenced earlier, and we all spoke about, build your network early. You have people outside your school who understand the pressures, who you can be honest with, and who will help you to think rather than react. So having a good coach is so important, and it doesn't have to be at the point of deputy headship. It could start earlier if it helps you build your confidence or get you to build, increase your own self-awareness. The role itself becomes unmanageable when someone is isolated, but it's unsustainable. So it's important that you find it sustainable by sharing the issues as they crop along. And there's always someone willing to share their experience or give you that kind of encouragement. So it's important that that you don't allow isolation to make headship harder than it needs to be.
That's great. Thank you. And Kate?
I think the biggest thing that I learned over all these years is that everyone on your team's got to have the same moral purpose. And I know that sounds like, oh yeah, well, everybody will. No, they really haven't. They really haven't. And the people that don't share your moral purpose or aren't prepared to sign up to it, that's where there's going to be issues. If everyone's wanting to get to the same place, then you can let go of that control, which is what I think happens with a lot of toxic heads that we hear about, or maybe know, or maybe worked for, is that they want that control and they want everything has to be what they say. If you let it, and it's hard because if it all goes wrong, it'll come back on you. But if you let people go and trust them with their ideas and things they want to do, support them if it goes wrong and help them get over that. And if it goes right, then they're going to be on to the next thing. The other thing I think is working out the difference between a maverick and a saboteur on your staff, because I've never wanted a team full of yes men, never, or yes women, yes people, because that's just me going, that's me in my echo chamber going, "Aren't we all great? Aren't I fantastic?" And they'll go, "Oh, yes, you are, kid. That's fabulous." And that's not reality. So I'm quite happy to have a couple of mavericks on my team that are going to go, "Oh, I might do it this way. Oh, I think she said this, but I'm going to try that. Let's do it like this. What if she says that, But it's really difficult sometimes to see the difference between someone that's got the same moral purpose as you, but a different approach, as to somebody actually doesn't like what you're doing, doesn't share your moral purpose, and is going to try and sabotage you. So it's important to work out the difference between those. And I think the last thing really is that heads don't always get it right. We're just as infallible as the next person. And I used to find on every one of my staffs, because I used to do this as a class teacher with children, I would find a couple of staff who were my benchmark. And if I said, "Right, we're going to do this thing," and Debbie and Natalie went, "Ooh," I knew I'd got it wrong. Whereas if I went, "We're going to do this thing," and most people went, but Debbie and Natalie went, "Oh yeah, that'd be all right," I'd got it right. The sort of benchmark people. So you can measure, how you've approached something with the staff, because you know that they're sort of that line for you. But it's about trusting your staff. And I think if you know that they're all got that same moral purpose as you don't have to like them all, you don't have to admire them all, but you're all going in the same direction, and that is far more likely to work.
Yeah, that's great. I can't believe we've already got to time for our panel. I was going to ask you one more question, so I think I might email you this question, because I'm going to do a follow-up blog. I've written everything down that everyone said, so if you're watching back, or if people have not been able to make tonight, I'm going to put all your tips and tricks into blog posts. The question I was going to ask, so just have a think, is what would be your one tip for someone who is contemplating headship? So just put that and see if we've shared lots of tips and tricks tonight, but anything, and feel free to jot it down. Thank you so much for joining us. As I know, lots of you have got school backgrounds, so you're still at school. So thank you so much for joining us and sharing your wisdom. It's been a great panel. I know we could have probably spent an hour or two just on the life of a head teacher. So I really appreciate you being here, and thank you on behalf of the Step Up community for giving your time this evening. Thank you. Okay. So we're now going to